Alrighty, so I might go ahead and just kind of get us started with some overview here. We will have a little bit of time before our presenters start. So as people continue to trickle in, we'll just make sure that they're able to get in and join us for this. I really want to thank everyone for coming out and joining us this morning. I really appreciate that. If I haven't met you yet, I'd like to introduce myself quickly. So my name is Henry Whitehead. I'm the program manager here at Rural Schools Collaborative, and I'm coming to you from very cloudy southern Wisconsin here on this Friday morning. I actually joined RSC fairly recently in the kind of late summer, early fall, but it's been such a pleasure to be part of RSC and the broader Rural Schools Collaborative network. And it's just great, again, to be able to, kind of be part of that professional learning community here for this Rural Teacher Corps Forum. When I heard that this was an event we did, I loved the idea, right? A chance to bring people together to share knowledge and experiences, ask each other questions, and really just kind of have it be an open platform among peers. So this is an event I've really been looking forward to and can't wait to get it started for us here. So I'd like to just give us to open a really brief kind of overview of Rural Schools Collaborative. I realize for some of you, there may be kind of a repetitive element to this. However, I think it is worthwhile just to kind of zoom out and look at what Rural Schools Collaborative is. So can folks see my screen okay? Awesome. So Rural Schools Collaborative is a small national nonprofit that has a really wide impact. The way I like to kind of think about it is we're a national network built around regional hubs with a place-based focus. So we've been around since about 2015, and our work has always been for supporting rural schools as the pillars of rural communities. We kind of joke on staff that our name is both super accurate and a little bit of a misnomer because we're really a collaborative for rural schools, not necessarily of rural schools. So when I talk about these regional hubs and our partners, those are folks who are doing the hard, really essential work to help rural schools, often in areas like teacher development or supporting schools with research practice partnerships. So that's often going to be higher ed partners, but we also have a lot of partners in spaces like community foundations and rural focused community nonprofits. We do our work through those regional hubs and support those partners in a lot of different ways. This map here highlights the service areas of our various regional hubs. So we have 16 hubs with over 20 partners within those, all working to kind of build up rural schools and rural communities in just a myriad of ways, but all with really great efforts. And you're going to learn about some of those here today. I want to just make sure I highlight that place-based focus bit at the end. That's always been essential to Rural Schools Collaborative. We believe that, rooting students, rooting curriculum, learning and teaching in place is essential to developing positive relationships to rural communities. And we really try to advocate that with everything we do, including storytelling, which is a big, big element of Rural Schools Collaborative. So this isn't the first time you'll hear me say this, but if you haven't already, subscribe to our newsletter. It's like the easiest place to see so much of our rural storytelling. And you'll get a lot of great stories about teachers, programs, and things happening all across rural America. So just to give a little more kind of context of why this sort of event, the first one I think is pretty obvious, right? This is a platform to share success and challenges in rural focused teacher preparation. All right, so this is a chance for a lot of different partners operating with different focuses in different regions to lend their expertise. We all have available to us the tools and knowledge to have successful teacher preparation programs and support rural teachers in their development. There doesn't need to be a reinventing of the wheel. And so by sharing information and experiences, we're able to have more effective programs. We also really want to have this be an opportunity to highlight the great work happening by our rural partners here to counter national narratives that, oh, there's this huge deficit, no one wants to live or teach in rural spaces, and it's all doomed. We really want this to be an opportunity to, while acknowledging challenges, while acknowledging that there are barriers, counter that national narrative that there are a lot of positive things happening in these places as well. And I think a grow your own program mixed with Rural Teacher Corps, that's just such an example of hope for me and a really nice jumping off point for us to begin from here. I also really believe that when we communicate with each other, that builds collaboration and trust. That allows folks from different states who may not have the opportunity to work together, just kind of in the standard going abouts of their day, to come together and find opportunities. And we've been able to see that a lot with the Rural Schools Collaborative Network. Just a little bit ago, I was able to join a rural teacher corps from rural Illinois on a trip to a place-based education kind of expertise mecca at the Teton Science Schools in Jackson, Wyoming, as they went on a training mission there. And it was so cool to be able to watch that partnership in action. And that all starts with just sharing information, meeting each other, and getting to know each other's work. The fourth reason I wanted to do this, and this is a little more personal, but every day I get to see how amazing our partners are, and I can brag about them as much as I want to like my wife, my friends, my cats. But I really, I want the chance to brag about them in a more national platform. So this is just kind of a selfish chance for me and the RSC team to do that and really just kind of shine that light on the work they're doing, because it is really special stuff. So with that, I'm going to throw it to and introduce our executive director, Taylor McCabe-Yunke, to give a little bit more history and background on Rural Schools Collaborative's work with rural teacher corps.
Thanks, Henry. I'm Taylor McCabe-Yunke. I know some of you, but not all of you. I'm excited to have you all here today to learn a little bit more about rural teacher corps and also celebrate some of the intersections and chances for the rural teacher corps concept to support other concepts that are helpful in supporting rural teachers like Grow Your Own. So I'm excited for Amaya as well to be here. So thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to share just a couple of slides before we get started on some of the history of this work. Let me make sure that I can get my screen sharing figured out here. All right. Are you all able to see my screen here? All right. All right. So what the heck is a rural teacher corps? This is a pretty broad definition that, may be sort of more internal to Rural Schools Collaborative, but we like to think of the rural teacher corps concept as any intentional effort to recruit, prepare, or retain rural educators. And so with that broad brush, there are a lot of different ways that this can be executed, which leads me to sharing some of the work that our partners are already doing in this space and like who makes up the Rural Teacher Corps Network. So there are 25 plus programs all across the country, as Henry mentioned, that are doing these intentional efforts to recruit, prepare, and retain rural educators. Some of these we've certainly worked closely with and helped launch and have celebrated their growth over the years. And some of these are just folks that we've met along the way who are also really interested in this work and wanted a space to connect with peers, share ideas, and also have their efforts really celebrated and, as Henry mentioned, get a spotlight on it. So we're only going to get to hear from a few of these programs today, but I would definitely encourage you all to reach out to these folks, learn more about their programs, or reach out to RSC if we can help connect you to, hey, I want to try X. Do you know someone who Y? That's really what we're here for and part of what we hope to do every year with this forum. So shout out to our broad group of partners. I know some of you had done this forum in the past and shared about your model. I wish we could do all of them today, but we would certainly run out of time. So please take the opportunity afterwards to check out some of these great efforts. So I don't need to preach to the choir, but part of why Rural Schools Collaborative really sees rural teachers as core to broader sustainability in rural communities is because when you have passionate, high-quality teachers, that leads to vibrant rural schools, which leads to strong communities. And so rural schools and teachers do face distinct challenges where schools are decontextualized, funding levels are challenging, our teacher levels are declining. But there's also huge opportunities and assets in rural spaces. And thinking about this Rural Teacher Corps concept really squarely tackles each of these challenges and flips them on their head to create a really positive model for rural schools and the future of rural vitality. So any institution can create a Rural Teacher Corps. We've got sort of a mix of higher ed partners, nonprofit partners, as well as community foundations and folks who are financially supporting these types of programs as well. But we're really looking for teachers that have a strong sense of rural place, the mission and rural identity, have an understanding of rural issues and also opportunities. Our strong communicators can help share that story of their community, our collaborators, and are really perceived as community leaders and catalysts for change in their local spaces. So I do want to share a little bit of the historical work that Rural Schools Collaborative has done. Our Catalyst initiative is an effort that provides some flexible planning dollars early on for institutions to plan and launch a Rural Teacher Corps. Any initiative that really is going to be holistically owned and sustainable needs a chance to sort of be thoughtfully prepared and launched. And so this is our way of sort of promoting this concept with partners and also allowing them to have a cohort and a space to hear from other institutions that are also planning this process. So I'm really excited to share, as we're wrapping up sort of the third year of this iteration of the Catalyst Initiative, that in the last 3 years, we've been able to dedicate $325,000 to launching Rural Teacher Corps, which has led to 13 new partners in this Rural Teacher Corps learning community. And as a group, we are now collectively engaging and training nearly 250 new rural teachers entering the field every year. And what I find amazing about these early flexible planning dollars is that that investment in the last 3 years attracted more than $1,250,000 plus in matching grants and regional support, state level support to make sure that these programs can continue to sustain and live on well after. So we can't take credit for these, but we're really excited to provide a space to help launch these efforts and connect one another to make sure that all rural communities can have well-prepared teachers and strong communities as a result of that. So that's a little bit about our work. You'll get to hear from one of our Catalyst initiative folks today, and I'm really excited to turn it back over to Henry and our panel today to talk a little bit about how this broad idea of a Rural Teacher Corps concept can really nestle and fit well with the Grow Your Own concept, and hear from some of our partners who are doing this in reality. So thanks, Henry, for letting me do a bit of the history there. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Taylor. And I think that sets us up with a really great foundation for what a Rural Teacher Corps is, why it matters, and kind of the multifaceted approaches they can take. And we're so excited to have kind of a similar lay of the land set by Amaya Garcia with Grow Your Own programs. So if you don't know Amaya, she's the director of pre-K research and practice with the education policy program at New America. Amaya is a national expert on Grow Your Own education and all sorts of programs and policies within that. She leads New America's Grow Your Own Educators National Network, a professional learning community for GYO programs across the country. She also conducts research and analysis on English learner policy, bilingual teacher preparation, career pathways, and early education. I know for Taylor and I, like when a new Amaya article drops in the New America newsletter, it's like, okay, everything else gets bumped one spot down the list because that's the first thing to read. So we're so excited that she's able to be here with us. And Amaya, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that very generous introduction, Henry. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Let me just make sure it's right. I was really excited to see SIU Carbondale on the list of partners because that is where I spent my early childhood years, was in Carbondale, Illinois. And now I live in Washington, D.C. Okay. So I'm here to provide a national framing of GYO educator programs and policies. I'm going to start by sharing a short video that kind of captures what GYO is and what it aims to do. Then I'll go into more detail about how GYO is defined, what those essential elements of GYO are, and finally, I'm going to talk about what we know about how GYO is being funded and designed across the country. So first we'll start, oh, I did it wrong. I keep doing this wrong where I forget to click the box. Hold on. All right, nope, I did it right. Sorry, I wanted to make sure the video works. Okay. So we're going to watch this really short video. It's about 3 minutes long, and then we'll keep going.
Just outside Seattle, Highline Public Schools is developing bilingual teachers from the ground up. In Chicago, the public school district has launched multiple programs to grow the ranks of its teacher workforce. And in Mississippi, rural school districts are helping community members gain a foothold in the teaching profession. These programs share the goal of developing teachers from the community for the community. Known as Grow Your Own, or GYO, this strategy is designed to address multiple challenges including persistent teacher shortages, a linguistic and racial mismatch between teachers and students, and the misalignment between teacher preparation and local needs. GYO programs are partnerships between school districts, teacher preparation programs, and/or community-based organizations that recruit and prepare local community members to enter the teaching profession and teach in their communities.
GYO is a powerful strategy because it amplifies the assets of community and seeks to leverage those assets to benefit students in local school systems. This emphasis on who to recruit is really a critical component of GYO programs.
This means GYO programs propel paraeducators who support the education of our most vulnerable students to the head of the classroom. Seek out high school students with the goal of bringing them back to their home districts to teach. Empower parents to pursue degrees in teaching to give back to their local schools and communities. And focus on non-traditional candidates who work full-time or students who are entering college for the first time. GYO programs often offer financial assistance, paid job-embedded learning, academic advising, flexible scheduling for courses, mentorship, tutoring, test preparation, and a cohort model. GYO can be supported in various ways. For starters, policymakers can expand access to community-based teacher preparation programs, and philanthropic groups can financially support local teacher pathways. Higher education institutions can develop strong partnerships with local school districts who can invest in developing local teachers themselves. But most importantly, everyone can champion GYO as a community-based strategy to improve public education.
All right. So I always like to share that video just so that everyone kind of gets where I'm coming from when I talk about Grow Your Own, because as I'll talk about later, we don't actually have a standardized definition of what Grow Your Own is because it's such a localized strategy. People think about it and utilize the term in lots of different ways. But here I want to emphasize again the way that we define Grow Your Own. And I want to draw your attention to those the word partnerships and the word community, right? So we think of them as partnerships between ed prep programs, school districts, and ideally community-based organizations that are focused on recruiting and preparing those local community members to enter the teaching profession and teach in their communities, right? These are community-oriented, they're community developed, and they really are designed to try to help with some of the shortages and pain points we see in the teacher pipeline and making sure that people who are in schools also reflect the students that they're serving. So based on our research and the research kind of in the larger literature base, we think that there are 5 essential elements of GYO. Again, I'm going to emphasize partnerships a lot. I'm going to emphasize community a lot, but I guess those are the kinds of things that I want you to really be thinking about in the future when you think about GYO. So a key ingredient in the success of any GYO program starts with that strong partnership. These programs should be co-designed by the school districts, by the EPPs, by community organizations, and sometimes, you want states to have a role as well, to make sure that there's direct connections between what candidates are learning in their preparation coursework and what they're experiencing in school classrooms to ensure alignment. Like maybe your ed prep program's preparing a lot of PE teachers, but that's not what you need. You need early elementary teachers, you need social studies teachers, so you can make sure that there's sort of that cohesion across who's being prepared and who's coming to your schools. States that offer GYO grant programs, like I said, should be an additional partner in the work in that they often direct the goals of the grant effort, setting expectations and offering technical assistance. And each partner has an important role to play in ensuring access to the program completion, and potentially induction into teaching. The second element we like to talk about is community-based recruitment that aims to increase the ethnic, linguistic, and racial diversity of the teacher workforce. We all know that this is an important goal that many states and districts are working to change. We have a predominantly female, a predominantly white teacher workforce, actually predominantly monolingual as well. And that's not really aligning with who we're seeing coming into our schools. And so by recruiting those high school students who are from the community and are maybe more representative of their fellow students, we're going to hopefully change that dynamic a little bit. The other element that we talk a lot about are wraparound supports, kind of throughout their continuum of in the program. And so we think of these as absolutely essential because of the folks that are usually recruited into these programs. Lots of them are paraprofessionals or working adults who maybe don't earn high wages, who have been away from school for a while. And so they really need sort of this one-on-one support. So we see programs offer things like financial assistance, that's obviously huge, to give them some kind of tuition reduction, scholarships, conditional loans, but then we also see people do a lot of work around test preparation to make sure that they're able to pass those licensure exams. People need help navigating higher ed. It's not always easy to go from working in school to trying to navigate, how do I sign up for classes? How do I make sure my credits I already have are counted? How do I get support in my home language? Those kinds of things. Cohorts end up being a huge component of GYO, making sure that you have a community built in for you to rely on, and so on and so forth. Another thing that we like to see in GYO is paid work-based experience under the guidance of a mentor teacher that aligns with the educator preparation coursework. And you'll see that aligns kind of with what we're seeing now with teacher registered apprenticeship and with some residency programs, is really making sure that people get paid. So we did some focus groups with multilingual paraprofessionals who are interested in becoming teachers. I think we did these in 2015. And one of the big things they talked about was they couldn't afford to do unpaid student teaching, right? And that's not just for paraprofessionals, that's for a lot of folks. And so we really need to be making sure that people are paid for the work they're doing in schools. And we know that working with a mentor teacher will help them be better prepared on day one. The last component are these structured pathways. And so again, going back to those focus groups, which actually were the impetus for a lot of the work we've done on GYO, is a lot of people didn't even know where to begin. They didn't know what programs were available in their state or how they could pay for them. They didn't know how long these programs would take. And so we also met people who've tried to do this on their own, and it might take them 7 or 8 years, right, to earn a degree. And so by offering a structured pathway, you can tell someone, okay, this is the credits you might already have. This is how many credits you need to complete. We think you should be able to do this in like 3 years. So people know kind of what they're getting into and what that endpoint is, so they can see something to like that motivates them to reach their goal. In 2020, I did a 50-state scan of program programs and policies. And the reason I did that is because I was starting to see a little bit more interest in GYO. It was coming a little more elevated, but no one had really looked at like what's actually happening across the states, how many states are investing, what kinds of programs exist, how are they being designed. And so I collected the data in 2019 and wrote up the findings in 2020. I did a slight update to those findings in 2022. And then this year in 2024, I'm actually doing probably a full revision of the scan because things have changed just that much. We've seen so much interest in GYO, even from the Biden administration, for example. They've incorporated GYO strategies actually into a lot of their federal grant programs focused on teacher preparation. And we've seen I talked to, federal Hill staffers quite a bit about GYO because people are really trying to figure out how they can strengthen the teaching profession and diversify it. So I have 5 main findings from that scan. The first is what I said at the beginning about localities using the term GYO in different ways to address common problems. So most GYO programs are driven by intersecting issues in the teacher workforce. So we talk about subject area, but also geographic area shortages and the need to increase racial and linguistic diversity, right? The reason that we know these issues are happening is because we see all the headlines and people are experiencing this day to day. I think there is some disagreement on the extent of the shortages, but at the local level, some of those shortages are very real. Research by Matthew Kraft and Melissa Arnold-Lyon reveal that the occupational prestige, interest among students to become teachers, the number of individuals preparing to work as teachers, and on-the-job satisfaction of practicing teachers are at their lowest level in 50 years, right? So one thing that's interesting to me about GYO is that it flips that paradigm a little bit, because I think that there are people in the community who are interested in becoming teachers. They've just faced a lot of barriers to doing so. And the whole point of GYO is to try to remove those barriers. It's an attractive proposition because it focuses on community-based candidates who are familiar with the context of local schools, feel deep connections to their community, and again, like I said, are representative of the students and families attending local schools. But what's interesting to me is that when I look at how states talk about GYO, like in some of their grant programs or in their guidance, they actually never really talk about what GYO does. It's usually like, this is a problem GYO is going to solve. And so, for example, like in Missouri, it's part of their bigger priority to prepare and develop, effective educators, and that the programs provide a culture of collaboration between school districts, higher ed, and communities, serve as a workforce development initiative, and instill community pride. So you see a little bit of the community, a little bit of the partnership there. But then when you look at Delaware, for example, which has legislation, again, the goal is similar. They want to improve the recruitment, retention, and diversity of educators. So we're really starting with that problem. But then they talk about that it offers support and guidance to people like in high school, to non-traditional routes, and continuing through post-sec, and culminating in their being hired as an educator by a district attorney. We don't see anything about partnerships. You don't see anything about community, right? And so again, that's why I spend a lot of time drilling in those two concepts when we're thinking about GYO, because at the end of the day, we want to be people from the community, have them stay in the community so that we can build a high quality, sustainable workforce. My next finding is that most states have at least one GYO program, but there's a lot of variety in program design and strategy. And this is part of why people talk about grow your own as an umbrella term, to mean that you're recruiting a specific population, you're providing them supports, but you're doing this in a lot of different ways, right? We don't have like a standardized approach. So when I looked at the data again this year, there were only 2 states that I found, so Maine and New Mexico, that did not have some type of GYO program for K-12 teachers. And I'm only talking about K-12 teachers. There's a whole other subset of work on GYO in the early educator landscape. New Mexico used to have a grant program, but they no longer do. They have a different kind of scholarship now. In the remaining states, I found programs for high school students, paras, community members, career changers, non-certified school staff, parents, or some combination. Texas has the largest number of programs due to their large high school focused program, and their longstanding investment in GYO, and then how they distributed their COVID recovery relief funds, which I will talk about later. But I estimate that they have like around 400 programs. And again, those programs all look different because they have different pathways for different populations. Due to investments in GYO at the state level, there's been a huge growth in how many states are now supporting it. So back when I first did this, I said very confidently that most of these efforts were initiated at the district level. Now I think it's a little more complicated because we have so many states that are funding it. They're still being, designed and developed at the district, but they're being supported by states, right? So you see more of sort of like the local is expanding a little bit to really be like, here's the state, we're giving money, and then like this is how it's being implemented and what's going on. GYO programs vary in terms of the pathways offered and what supports are offered to candidates. So like Michigan, Minnesota, Oregon, and Texas, they have programs for high school students and for adult community members, and these are state funded programs, while others only offer a pathway for high school students. So states like West Virginia has an interesting one where they have actually actualized the full pathway from high school into earning a teaching career, which most programs haven't done that yet. And then for paraprofessionals, we have like Mississippi, North Carolina, and Tennessee. I've looked at actually all the program design features of every program that I could find, and it's very interesting. Like some only provide scholarships. Some of the high school ones are really just about career exploration and mentorship. Some programs utilize dual enrollment, career technical education, loan forgiveness, conditional loans, online. Really, it's like everything you could think of is kind of thrown into this GYO umbrella. So it's actually quite interesting to think about how it kind of relates to some of the other initiatives happening right now, like teacher residency and teacher apprenticeship. The next finding is that more than half of states have a GYO policy, but funding for GYO programs is unstable. So actually, I have a little map here. So this is how many states now offer financial other support for grow your own programs. It's 35 in DC. When I first did this in 2020, it was 19 states. So again, we've seen a huge explosion in interest in the promise of GYO. Tennessee doesn't really have grant programs anymore, but they're the only state that funds like a Tennessee Grow Your Own Center. So like a technical assistance center that's designed just to help grow your own programs be, high quality and strong. I also wanted to point it out that Colorado funds a rural teaching fellowship that is structured as a year-long clinical experience for teacher candidates in the final year of their teacher prep programs, and that it's a shared cost model where the higher ed provider and the state's Department of Higher Education, they each split the cost 50-50 because it's a $10,000 stipend that folks get. And then the federal government has, through ESSER, right, there was billions and billions of dollars that were put into the hands of state education agencies that were fairly flexible. And some states decided to use this to expand comprehensive preparation programs, including GYO. And so some of the states that use ESSER funds are Mississippi. They have a state level teacher residency program that was initially funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And then they decided to use ESSER funds to fund a second cohort. Missouri used $50 million to offer every school district funding for GYO, so everyone was eligible to receive $10,000. Tennessee invested $6.5 million to launch their GYO effort that is now converted into teacher registered apprenticeship. Like I said, Texas has long invested in it. They used to invest about $1 to $3 million for each round of competition, but they boosted that amount to $35 million due to COVID dollars. And Maryland created a non-competitive grant called Maryland Leads that included funding for GYO, and I think almost all but one LEA in the state chose to pursue GYO, and it was about $48 million total. The issue is that since their funds are dwindling down, it remains to be seen how many of these efforts will be sustained in the longer term. Funding sustainability is actually a central issue for many of the GYO programs that we work with in our network. Most are funded using a combination of grants, state and local funding. And while we know state level grants are an essential component of funding GYO, we also know that they're not forever. They're not permanent, right? Like, so some programs are very much kind of at the mercy of the legislative cycle and whether or not they're going to fund GYO this year, which can make it hard to take on new candidates. And so I think one thing we need to do as a field is to kind of think more about how we sustain these sort of innovative teacher preparation models across all kinds of contexts. The next finding is that pathways for high school students most often utilize career technical education or dual enrollment. And the reason I want to point that out is because there's a lot of interest in how GYO could help high school students become teachers, but we don't have a lot of data to actually show that high school students who participate in GYO become teachers, right? And part of that is because it's under research, but also because there aren't a lot of actual full pathways built for these students. If you're doing a career and technical education program, you're doing some career exploration, you might be like getting to work in a daycare, getting to work in elementary school, but once you exit high school and go into college, that doesn't mean there's anyone there at the college to help guide you and navigate you on that path to becoming a teacher, right? And so I think that's something that's important to talk about. But 38 states and DC have some kind of pathway for high school students, and some do provide dual enrollment as well, but maybe like 3 credits or so. And I guess it depends on like where you end up going to college and how those go. And then Educators Rising is widely used. But again, it's interesting because it varies in how people design it and how people deliver it. So like in one state, I think it was in Alaska, they very much like Rising has like this competition. They have these conferences and a big part of it are these competitions. So there are some programs that really focus on prepping students for those competitions. Like you can have a competition on giving a lecture, you can have a competition on lesson planning, things like that. Whereas in Arizona, there's a program through Arizona State University, which has like this whole interesting like school staffing model, and they integrate the Ed Rising students into that staffing model, and they actually are working in schools as tutors or small group facilitators. And so again, you're really getting different kinds of experiences based on where you're situated. And then a very small number of programs are utilizing apprenticeship to help youth gain training and hands-on experience working in schools. So Careerize Colorado has a youth apprenticeship program whereby students get hands-on training and learn the skills and competencies needed to work as a paraprofessional in the public school. And part of what's interesting about that is in Colorado, I think you can work as a paraprofessional at the age of 16, so they're able to get some of that like on the job experience and kind of fit with that apprenticeship. Also, paraeducators are an increasingly popular recruitment pool, but the amount of support they receive varies. And I think this is really important because it's great that you can provide folks scholarships to help them cover their cost of attendance. But if you're a non-traditional student, if you haven't been in school for a while, you actually usually need a lot more support than just money, right? And so, like I said, there are some states that are structured more as a partnership. And so I think those are the ones where you kind of see some of these wraparound supports that are being offered. For your own Illinois is a good example of this and the kinds of supports that can be offered to candidates. Some offer kind of like a residency component where again, they get to kind of still work as a para, but they're working with a mentor teacher. And so I think that as we kind of, we don't do a lot of advocacy in New America, but kind of the way that I write and think about this is making sure that you aren't just recruiting people because like you're recruiting people, but you're actually giving them all the support they need to succeed, stay in the program, graduate, and become those teachers that you need in their district. And so you have to be pretty intentional about who you're pulling in and how you're supporting them along the way. And then I just wanted to end by sharing a little bit about the GYO toolkit that we published a couple of years ago, which has got a lot of different resources for practitioners and policymakers about GYO. These are the different chapters that we have in it. And importantly, a lot of this content was actually created by folks in our GYO National Network who are practitioners and experts and do this work every day. And we think that it's a valuable resource for the field. Thanks for the opportunity. And I look forward to hearing from Jeremy next, who is actually in our national network.
It's almost like we planned for him to go after you, Amaya. No, thank you so much for sharing all that. I think that just sets the table up so well for us and really encourage anyone who's interested to reach out to Amaya for more information on all of that. I also just quick before we go to Jeremy, want to mention, I forgot to say earlier, but if you do have any questions throughout, feel free to just put them in the chat. And then at around 11:40, we are going to have a 11:40 Central Time. So about an hour from right now, we'll just kind of open it up to a panel Q&A. So all questions, just throw them in the chat. They won't get answered for the next hour, but still just put them in there. Better to do that than forget about it. So I want to then transition us to Jeremy Eltz. So Jeremy Eltz currently, as of this week, is the Education and Workforce Development Manager for the Good Food Institute. Previously, Jeremy served as the former Director of Rural Education at the University of Indianapolis Center of Excellence in Leadership of Learning, or CEL, and his goal is to identify the variety of inequities in rural school districts and find solutions through collaboration with rural stakeholders to address those. Jeremy has led CEL's Rural Teacher Corps efforts through the Catalyst Initiative grant and has served as the lead of Rural Schools Collaborative's Indiana and Great Lakes Regional Hub. So Jeremy's been just an awesome advocate and friend to the Rural Schools Collaborative community, and we're so excited to hear from him today. Over to you, Jeremy.
Awesome. Actually, Jeremy, do you mind if I hop in real quick? I just want to add a little bit of context here. So Amaya, thank you so much for the background on Grow Your Own. And just so that you folks know who the panelists are that you're hearing from, each of these folks are Rural Schools Collaborative regional hub partners. So we've worked with them to launch their Rural Teacher Corps efforts. But each of these folks are also folks that are now doing intentional Grow Your Own work. And so when we heard from Amaya, not all Grow Your Owns have to be rural, and not all Rural Teacher Corps have to be Grow Your Own models. But if you think about the ways in which you can weave these together, it will also help unlock some of those partnerships, both with school districts, but also potential funding streams to support these efforts in a rural concept. So the three partners you're going to hear from are doing both and have worked with Rural Schools Collaborative to some extent to design and support the early phases of their project. So I just wanted to kind of give that context, Jeremy, before you hop in, that's a little bit about what we're going to hear is now zooming down to this local level now that we've set the course for the national level. So Jeremy, please take us away.
Yeah, thank you. And that kind of sets me up because I've started calling it Indiana's rural teacher ecosystem instead of a pipeline, because the pipeline is just so rigid and it almost assumes we're tracking kids sequentially through a system. And so I think it's a food web that we're trying to feed, that we're trying to get, people from all over the ecosystem, all over, people are onboarding and offboarding, on-ramping, off-ramping throughout their career. So I think that's kind of how we've tried to set it up with teaching. We focus on high school kids, college kids, paraprofessionals, people that are retired. Let's bring them back into the system. So that's kind of how we've shaped this. And support from RSC and New America has been incredible for Indiana. I think when we started this work, there really wasn't just a big landscape of GYO that was just real spotty. And I feel, a few years later, 2024, I would say argue a lot of our high schools at least have a GYO program. And many of our higher ed institutions have started focusing or paying attention at least to rural. So a big part of our Catalyst grant was getting just kind of that culture change in higher ed so that they support rural students, so that they keep them in that pathway. So SEL, first off, I just want to kind of start with who we are. We're kind of unusual in that we don't actually have students. So we are an outward-facing organization at the University of Indianapolis. We've been around for a little over 20 years now. But we really try to find innovative practices, bring them to Indiana, incubate and scale them up. But one of the most vital things to our organization that we take a lot of pride in is that we're a neutral convener and networker. And that has allowed us to work with every institution of higher ed in our state, and most of our K-12 schools in our state. And SEL has done work in all 92 counties of Indiana. And it's really because we don't care what the politics are, what policies come down from our state. We're going to try to leverage those to create good outcomes for our students in our schools. So a lot of times when we work with a school, we don't impose an agenda or anything like that. We go to them and we ask, what are your needs, wants, desires for your kids, and let's see how we can make it happen. Our biggest initiative, and it's one that we really truly leverage in the state of Indiana, and that kind of gives Indiana a bit of an advantage to other states, is our early college model and our dual credit policy. So we believe strongly in the early college model, and this has really helped seed a lot of these grow your owns at the high school because it allows to get college credit paid for in high school. So we've been doing this for since 2007. It's structured on 8 core principles, which are actually very similar to Amaya's 5 essential elements of a GYO, and I'll show you this in a bit. But we train and we endorse our early college high schools, and we've been designated that by our Commission for Higher Education to do that. Right now, we have about 55 actually, but we have a few more schools that are getting endorsed currently this spring. Just about 2 weeks ago, I was up in Gary, Indiana, actually endorsing a high school up there. Why we focus on early college, it makes higher ed obtainable for families. I think for us to build this educator ecosystem, we first have to put conditions in place that allow it to grow. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, higher ed is no longer accessible to a lot of families, especially our rural kids. So really, that's kind of where we start with this program, is trying to make higher ed available to all students. We also provide targeted supports to underserved youth. And this is one of the things that I'll get to when I show you our eight core principles. We target a very specific population of students throughout our network. And these are the first generation college going students, students of color, marginalized groups of students, students of poverty, students like that have the ability, the want, desire to go to college, but they've often been overlooked. So those are the students we target through these. Early college provides cost savings to our students. So if a student in Indiana receives their ICC, the Indiana College Core, that's the first 30 credits of college, it saves between $3,200 and $10,400, depending on what institution they end up going to. It also decreases time to completion. So I always tell this story. We work with Rising Sun High School down in southern Indiana. They had a student that went through their GYO, their Grow Your Own program, and got their associate's degree while in high school. She went to college, left the community for about a year and a half, came back, did her student teaching, and was hired to teach at this school. So she was gone from the community for a year and a half before returning to do her student teaching, and then she was a teacher. So she's a 20-year-old teacher at Rising Sun. She doesn't teach high school, though. They knew better than to do that. So this is our early college core principles. So I'm not going to go through all of these with you. Like Amaya shared, very similar to those essential elements of a Grow Your Own. So again, our targeted population, we have a curriculum and plan of studies that we set out. It's called the Ed Professions Pathway that we've supported schools with implementing. Really get that college going culture set up for students so that they feel supported and ready to go to college. It is college level coursework. So the teachers we work with, we provide a ton of rigorous professional development so they know what a college course is. Those wraparound supports, the tutoring, collaboration and partnerships are huge. So bringing the institutions of higher ed in, again, CEL works with all of them. So we're able to work with schools and identify who might be your best higher ed partner. Leadership and staffing. This has been crucial for our work because the turnover isn't just in teachers, the turnover is in principals and superintendents. So it's been tough to try to really develop those relationships. And then in 2 years, the superintendent leaves, wants to start a new program. So we've been trying to communicate with the community a lot more about early college because if the community wants it, the school district is going to keep it, and leveraging school board members as well. And then the data collection and analysis. So teaching the schools how to, again, leverage like attendance data, SAT data, all of those things. So in Indiana, we're probably no different than any other state. I've been a part of enough national organizations to know we're pretty in line with everybody else around the country. College going rate has dropped a lot, unfortunately, and it wasn't because of COVID. It's been dropping since 2015 when we had our high. And right now, it's much, much lower for rural even. Only 49% of our rural students are going on to post-secondary, and it's even less for our rural male students. That's about 47%, 46% of our rural male students going on. So not great. Our race and ethnicity and gender gaps continue to grow. So you can see this next graph, our Hispanic and Latino populations are having the most struggle with moving on. And that's why with our GYO program, we did target our schools that have the highest population of Hispanic students in them. And I'll share an example of one of the schools in a second. And part of the issue is students are not seeing the relevance of higher ed anymore. They're paying more and getting less. That's the perception. But the lifetime earnings are still just far greater, but that doesn't really matter to a lot of these kids when, that's way too far down the road. And I always share this in just about every presentation I try to give because it just really stresses how good early college and dual credit access are for our kids. And it also, when we've worked with schools, sometimes we'll get schools to say, oh, we're a AP school and kind of shut us out. And that's always a concern because when we look at our data, 34% of our dual credit earners are low income, while only 15% of our AP kids are low income. So that does kind of show that AP, rightfully or wrongfully, it is targeted to a higher population of kids, unfortunately. So with our early college kids, we're really targeting those students that are kind of on the bubble. So this is our early college network, and these are the schools we've targeted with our Grow Your Own and our Rural Teacher Corps. So this we've been working with for 5 years now. We have, from small 200 kids all the way up to 1,500 kids, and we're from far northern Indiana to far southern Indiana, and range of free and reduced lunch rates all in between. And this is kind of results that we just got in about, money saved and the Indiana College Corps earned. So again, building out the pool of applicants for these programs, we got to have more kids going on to post-secondary. This is across all pathways. It's not just our ed professions pathway. So in 2023, $7 million were saved because our kids were able to take so many dual credits. and 439 students received the ICC. So 439 students in our network got those first 30 credits of college at least under their belt. And another thing, Indiana has passed legislation last year to pay schools for ICCs and associates earned. So a school will get $1,500, I believe, for every ICC earned, and $2,500 for every associate's learned. So now high schools will be, because they're incentivized, pushing getting their students the ICC or the associates. Our goals for this were to create a pipeline of rural teacher preparation from student to teacher, increase diversity of the teaching profession in Indiana. It's about 95% of our teachers in Indiana are white. About 90% of them are female. So diversifying it across race, gender, all of it. And then recruit, retrain, retain teachers throughout rural Indiana, as well as skilling up current teachers. So SEL does several initiatives where we skill up current teachers, because we believe if we invest in our current teachers, they will stay, and then they'll be able to do either more or different things within the school as targets continually change. We know everything is a moving target in education. So the more skills, the more credentials our teachers have, the more ability and flexibility our schools have to adjust. I'll share one of the programs in a second. Rural school districts in Indiana are not growing, but they stayed the same. So they're not dying as the perception is. Indiana is a very white state, but the fastest growing population in rural is the Hispanic population. So making sure our schools have the ability to adjust to that and be able to provide the services they need. They're struggling to find staff, qualified staff, people that they want. And then just the turnover rate every single year is about 15%. And many of them are leaving the profession. Stuff you guys already know, the schools are struggling. They don't really do recruitment and retention well. So we've helped schools with marketing so that the community knows where they're at. And then just STEM and SPED are really hard in Indiana and every state as well. What we created, so this is a tool that we tried to put together for our schools, because many of our schools just couldn't visualize what we were trying to do and what it looked like. So every point in the spectrum, we tried to show where kids or students could be leveraged to build their ability, as well as where people could be drawn from, either sharing teachers with other districts, finding paraprofessionals that could potentially go to community college, get on an emergency permit, or even community members that probably have a degree, how quickly we could transition them. So just showing them the ability, making it visual, because a lot of times when you're just telling people or having them read something, if they can't visualize what this is going to look like, they're having difficulty with it. And then the phases we took with our school, so trying to create that marketing and communication plan. If people in the community don't know there's teaching positions and there is a pathway to become a licensed teacher, they're not going to do it. So marketing and communication, almost you have to start right off the bat recruiting people. We also leveraged our next level programs of study. So this was a new initiative about 3 or 4 years ago at the state, where we clearly defined pathways for schools. And then identify the regional community partners, those philanthropic organizations, try to bring in a little bit of extra funding for them. But for that sustainability piece, we did not rely on grant funding. But we did try to focus more on getting the dual credit and getting those associates in ICC so the state funding will keep coming. Get those pathways in place, provide professional development as needed for these teachers. We have an organization in the state that is expanding our youth apprenticeships. So leveraging those in the high schools to get students apprenticeships, that work-based learning. And then finally develop these mentorship programs to try to keep the people that they've defined. Early learning is something that we're really trying to build out. We all know there's no daycares in rural. Many of them are churches or things like that. So the schools can be an early learning center. So several of our schools have started to open early learning centers. And then part of our sustainability plan for Indiana is to get that registered teacher apprenticeship through the Department of Labor. I believe Indiana will have a few of those in place for next year. And then at SEL, we've been fortunate enough to get funding from the state to increase our teachers and English language learners. This is our ITEL program. We also have an analogous program called ISEAL for our SPED teachers. So like I mentioned before, SEL does quite a bit of skilling up of our current teaching staff. And that's something we're very proud of, and we hope to continue. Logansport High School is just a shining star in our state. They have their community is about 50% Hispanic, and they have a variety of other populations starting to grow because they've heard how welcoming Logansport is. And Logansport was not always that way. I can speak historically because I lived there probably 20 years ago now. The community was not as welcoming at the time, but now when you go up there, it is just a fantastic community, and everybody is so welcoming. So I give this stat in 2017, they only had 2 ENL educators, and they had about that time about a 40% Hispanic population. So with only 2 ENL educators, that created a large amount of issues. So they partnered with multiple universities, community organizations, and they were able to create a GYO program through IU Kokomo and a licensing program through Purdue. And they currently have around 50 ENL teachers. So seeing that need, they were able to respond. And we've tried to leverage Logansport through our network to share the practices they've done. So that's kind of the advantage of having this network. We're able to quickly identify best practices and share them throughout the network. So we have a lot of replication. Down in Southern Indiana, Southridge has started copying some of what Logansport does because they have a 30% Hispanic population and growing. I want to touch on place-based education just briefly because this is something RSC's really made me realize how just fantastic and wonderful it is. And I think I'm preaching to the choir here, as many of you know this, but we embedded this in our GYO and our Rural Teacher Corps because it is so important to us. And we know the data of students leaving rural communities and not coming back. So we wanted to ensure, and I bolded it right here, that students in high school and their student teaching or anything, they develop strong ties to their community. If they don't have a strong tie to their community, they probably aren't going to come back. And I can be another example of that. Where I graduated, it wasn't much to me, so I left, and I haven't really been back. So we wanted to ensure that these students find a sense of place and belonging in their communities, because even if they don't come back after college, they might come back when they have kids, when they really want to get that feeling of, back in the day, things like that. So PBE has been essential to us, and we are trying to find it and embed it in much of what we do. I want to just give you a quick example of Seeger High School. We gave a PBE professional development to them about 2 years ago. So this is over the span of 2 years. They took it back and went back to their school, brainstormed with students what was missing in Warren County. And this is it's cornfield. When you go to their high school, it's completely surrounded by cornfield. They landed on a coffee shop. They needed a coffee shop. So the students started a crowdfunding page to try to get funding to start this. They got a building donated to them. The crowdfunding ended. They got their goal. They raised enough money. So they shot for $50,000. They actually surpassed the $50,000. They got $67,000 from the community. They got the building donated. They got legal fees donated, free trash service, free inspection, electrician donated. It's amazing how much can get donated when it is student-led. It's really hard to turn down a 15-year-old kid that's asking you for something. So Pine Village Elementary donated the kitchen tool. So they now have, if you're in Warren County, Indiana, please stop by their coffee shop. It's really awesome. They use it for work-based learning and a lot of other things, fundraisers, events, things like that. And it's one of those things, there's a couple of these kids that are in the ed professions that I almost guarantee you they're going to come back to Warren County. Because if you've been a part of something like this, you're going to come back to your community. So I just can't stress that enough. All right, thank you. I was trying to finish on time.
You did. Thank you, Jeremy. That was great. And I love that little coffee shop as just kind of like a hopeful little vignette to leave us on. So really appreciate you sharing that. Again, if you've got any questions for Jeremy or Amaya so far, throw them in the chat. What we want to do right now is just give folks a chance to like stretch their legs, take care of any bodily needs you may have, use the bathroom, etc. So we're going to come back around 11:05 Central Time. Just adjust that to whatever your time is. So just like 3 minutes or so. And then we will be back with Jim Prad and Western Illinois University's Grow Your Own Consortium. So take a few moments and we'll see you all soon.
I am.
All right, so I'm really excited to introduce Jim Prad to you all. So Jim is a professor of philosophical and social foundations of education at Western Illinois University down in Macomb. And Jim spearheads and really just has done an amazing work with Western Illinois' Great River Grow Your Own Consortium, which is just a awesome network of all sorts of folks in Western Illinois working together to help address the rural teacher shortage there. And we are super excited for a lot of fun stuff that Rural Schools Collaborative has coming down the pipeline, upcoming with Jim and our friends at Western Illinois. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim to really speak a little bit more about that network building and consortium element of integrating Grow Your Own programs with Rural Teacher Course. So take it away, Jim.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Henry. And also I want to thank you, Taylor, for inviting me to be a part of this, this conversation. And it's actually interesting as I've seen us come from the great national level down to Indiana. Now we're going to hone in on one part of Illinois, actually. So we're kind of, and then we'll eventually go up to Minnesota. So we're kind of swirling around Midwest, which is, it's kind of home for me. So that's good. Well, first off, just want to say I know I have that long title is what my professorship is in, but I'm a former high school, middle school teacher to begin with after I left the Marine Corps. So I come and speak from that. And also my interest in research was in school reform to begin with too. So, and which is still there. And so there's lots of challenges as we look at the teacher shortage. And I've got lots of ideas of why I think we do have a shortage that's not related to some of the things that other people are thinking. But also I come to this as being I'm in my third term on our local school board. So I think I see issues across the board while I work directing a school that prepares basically teachers and educational leaders in West Central Illinois. But I want to kind of center our conversation here on really maybe this teacher shortage. And I have a couple slides. There's no doubt that we know that there's a great shortage, right? But as we see this as it's growing, what we use a lot is to look at the metrics and it alerts us. And as we as an institution was thinking about this back in 2018, 19, we started talking about some different types of pathways that we could create at Western. But one of the things that I'm going to talk about a couple as we build that into the kind of grow your own place where we're at here. One of the things we focus on often is what those real shortages are. And Illinois has a couple of great tools where they track them daily. What the teacher shortages, what the shortages are, what the educational leadership shortages are, and then also what the paraprofessional shortages are. And what's an important thing to note is that it's a human capacity shortage. So one of the things that's great about the Grow Your Own, as we're going to talk about, or as we see it, as we envision it at Western, is that it's acknowledging that, and we're trying to mitigate the shortages along the way. So one of the things that I'm going to share is back in 18, 19, we started thinking about non-traditional pathways of preparing and licensing people. And particularly, we have a Prad Appel program, and Appel is the professional educator's license in Illinois. Often school districts or states have certification. Illinois went to licensure about 10 years ago, and it's called Appel. And that's the initial teacher license. We have 3 different pathways that will take a paraprofessional who has their associate's degree and allows them to remain as a working paraprofessional and to get their teaching license. We're beginning our 8th, 9th, and 10th cohorts this summer. on 3 different areas: elementary ed, special ed, and early childhood. Because of legislation in the state of Illinois, we've been rolling every semester, which Western has 3 semesters, fall, spring, and summer, with new cohorts for early childhood educators. And that was really supported. That also has been supported by the ESH scholarship grant, which was incredible, which is dwindling here in Illinois, which has created some concerns. The other program that we have that we created, first students came in 2021, was the Master's in Arts of Teaching Alternative Licensure. We began in those high needs areas of special education and science and mathematics, secondary. And at this point, we now have 11 different licensure tracks. And we'll have our 13th, 14th, 11th, or 12th, 13th, and 14th this fall with physical education and world languages, both French and Spanish. Now, I'm going to pause here and just say, as I always begin, and actually when we go before the Illinois board shortly this summer for these new programs, none of us in teacher education ever wanted probably to prepare teachers this way. And we're very clear on that. However, this is a great need, particularly in West Central Illinois. And because of our program, which was created for West Central Illinois, and it's online or virtual, we actually license people throughout the state. So our Grow Your Own, while it has legs outside of our region or catchment area in a sense. So with that, when we were invited in early in the last fall by Grow Your Own Illinois to apply for a planning grant, one of the things is we sat down, we realized that we had a number of different programs that we're working with. We had the early childhood with the ESH para program. We had a parent mentoring program that grew out of Chicago, and we've had a pilot of that in rural Illinois up in East Moline. And then we also had our own Great River Teacher Corps, which was launched in 2018, which is for traditional students. We then had the MAT, which is the Alternative Licensure Pathways. And then we also, and this was through the great work of the Rural Schools Collaborative and ROE 33 here in Illinois, where we actually are pulled together to talk about our teacher pathways that high schools had been created. And all of a sudden, it got us realizing, wow, we've got all these components going on in West Central Illinois that we're a part of. And we saw the Grow Your Own planning grant from Grow Your Own Illinois to be a way of tying all those together and kind of where we want to go. Some of that's changed slightly based on the parameters of what the grant and what the grant desires, but yet we're still using it to build this consortium. And I'm going to talk about that actual consortium because really that's what's the power of this, because it's like anything in academia, you propose for a conference, then to go out and do research and write a paper. Right? Well, a grant work proposal, all of a sudden alerts you, say, hey, we've got to have these conversations with all these partners that we know they are our partners, but we haven't been talking to them as well as we need to be. And that's what we've done. So in our, we've created the Great Rivers Grow Your Own Consortium, which actually is all of this whatever light blue color that is in West Central Illinois. Now, though it encompasses 22 counties of the Great River Teacher Corps. So we created that out of all the students that were eligible for scholarships, the traditional scholarships, and we said let's use that as our umbrella. So that was our framing. As we said, let's encompass all the programs that we are doing. As of this spring, we realized that we have over or close to 500 teacher candidates would be considered Grow Your Own, because if you're a paraprofessional or if you are an MAT, those people they're being paid encumbered teachers within those school districts. And also, they're not going anywhere, right? They grew out of a paraprofessional because it was local and they got a job within the school. Often our MATs were long-term subs or paraprofessionals. They're there. They're not leaving, right? So there's that aspect of, why we want to create the shoulder tap people to become teachers. Well, here's a great mechanism, right? One of the great diagrams or pictures that we came up with was a map when Pam Rockwood, who put together our planning grant, when we grew our consortium, we realized, we have great relationships with all our school districts that we have our paras, our para to Pell, and also our MAT students, because we have an MOU with them, right? But we realized that we might not have the necessary communications up and down what needs to be the teacher pipeline. So when we created the consortium, we included all the 4 community colleges within the 22 counties of the region, the Great River Teacher Corps region. And then we included 3 of the ROEs that we've been working closely with. And also, is maybe one of those easy things, they were also many of those regional superintendents are also graduates of Western Illinois. So we already had that as alumni. And then we also included 2 of our really close-knit school districts that we work closely with as part of our advisory board, in a sense. And then we included also our other consortium members that were not preparing or working with teachers as Rural Schools Collaborative directly, the Western Dreamers, and also then the Illinois Association of Small and Rural Schools, which is our kind of the state consortium of all the rural and small schools, which is actually located in the Seymour Center here at Western Illinois University. So with that, one of the things that we recognize, and let's look at my time, okay, I'm good here, is that we began these conversations, and across the 4 different working sessions, we realized that we had to, part of the planning grant was building these partnerships. And we also then started realizing, okay, what can we offer and what can we ask of our partners? And when we came to writing then that not only the planning grant, but then also the implementation grant, we realized that Western has to be committed to certain things. And in this case, we have the professional licensing programs, right? Traditional, non-traditional, which is what we call the para to Pell, and then the alternative, right? And then with that, we also realized that we offer scholarships and tuition assistance through financial aid. In that scholarship realm, we have available Great River Teacher Corps. We also have the ESAGE scholarship, which, though that's changing, we now will have access to the forgivable loans of the Grow Your Own Illinois that will be available. And then a key thing was that of consortium leadership, right? Again, of pulling all the parts together and ensuring that we're talking and everyone's moving in the same common direction, in a sense. So that was what we thought, we knew that we would need to be committed to. Then when it came to our community colleges, which was really interesting, is all of these community colleges have always had a relationship with us, right? They'd had, at time, was called 2+2 agreements for transfers and that, but yet we really hadn't been talking about the actual, what would we call it, and I like how Jeremy talked about the ecosystem, right, of not a pipeline, right, because the pipeline's narrow, but yet that ecosystem of people coming on and coming off. Well, one of the things that we realized for our para to Pell program, that for it to be working, is all of those participants must have their associate's degree, right? And now what's available, I think we, in the other states also have this, is there's emergency teacher assistant or paraprofessional licensure that's being given to high school students, right? Which is great because there's a need. However, many of those students don't have any higher education credits, right? And so the associate's degree is going to be something that they're going to be offering. That was one of the things that we alerted them, because at one point they're like, well, really, what role do we have in this partnership? And it was great because in a partner meeting, we had one of the school districts had said, well, here's why, right? We've got 5 paras that are straight out of high school. Now they're emergency licensed now, but for them to be fully licensed, we need them to, have X amount of college credits. And again, that's learning them the programs that they need to be facilitating and assisting us with. Well, along with the providing associate's degrees, also in, the one thing that we realized too is having the Pell transfer plans. That means the plans for the model degree plans that we have at Western that they're aware of, that they're informing their students on as they're selecting their classes. But then a key thing is then also kind of sharing then information about the possibility of transferring then to continue for your Pell. Now at the ROEs, one of the things that we realize is that they're in assisting in the recruiting. They also have a key role in providing information around the associate's degrees, the programs with the community colleges. But here's a key thing, is they're key in licensing the paraprofessionals and our substitute teachers, right? Because many of our MAT students come in as long-term subs. So they're already partnering with us in that capacity. And then in Illinois, our ROEs provide an incredible amount of professional development for both for in-service teachers and in-service paraprofessionals. So that's something that's an ongoing thing that they will do. And even this summer, I know we have regionally SEL and some special education trainings that are going on in conjunction with our local Spoon River Community College and also Western Illinois University. So again, it's these partnerships are often already there, but keeping the information flow and tying everything together hasn't been there in the past. Now going down to the school districts, the partnership is crucial here because at the school districts who receive an MAT student or a paraprofessional, they're assisting not only with recruiting for that, but then they're providing the mentors and coaches for those paras and MAT students, which is part of an agreement. And also they're providing, well, part of the MOU requires them to pay the teaching resident as a first-year teacher at a minimum. Okay. One of the things we're also talking about is tuition assistance. There's been dollars in Illinois that have been given to school districts to address the teacher shortage. So those are for them to free those up for their students to use that in taking courses with us when there isn't financial aid that's available. And so they play a crucial role in this partnership. And then lastly is our consortium partners. We see that there's that need for providing us feedback and looking at whatever some opportunities or weaknesses we might have within our plan as we talk about the both the access for our whatever pathway a para or a parent mentor wants to take, or a MAT student. But also a key thing is on advocacy, both at the state level, national level, public relations through Rural Schools Collaborative is crucial as we, again, look at telling our story. Now, I'll say this, that we just submitted our implementation grant last Monday. And so we're still in the process for that. And we are, looking again to continue to shear up all the connections up and down what I'll call that pipeline of those 22 counties in the Great River Grow Your Own Consortium. And I think I'm probably under time here. And so I was going to have some questions, but I'm going to turn it back over since I might have rattled a little bit quickly. So.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much, Jim. And yeah, again, if people have questions, throw them in the chat or save them till we are kind of all together for a little bit of a Q&A, opening this thing up at the end here. As someone who's been lucky enough to be part of those planning calls and, be joining in that consortium, I can really just echo everything Jim said and add that it's been really great to see how just even by creating the space of the consortium, the collaboration and communication really has been flowing, both between partners at the same level, two community colleges talking, or between levels. It's been really great to see and great to be a part of. So we're going to be excited to watch that in the future and see how it continues to grow. I'm really excited to introduce our final partner here. So we've got Kathrina O'Connell. Thanks for waiting, Kathrina. And Kathrina is an assistant professor of professional education at Bemidji State University, which is up in kind of north central Minnesota for our non-Midwesterners in the chat here. And Bemidji State is a 2023-24 recipient of RSC's Catalyst Initiative grant to help, initiate the planning of a Rural Teacher Corps. And Kathrina leads Bemidji State's Rural Teacher Corps recruitment and preparation retention efforts. So we're really excited to see how that's taking shape in the unique context of North Central Minnesota. And I'm going to pass it off to you, Kathrina.
Thank you so much. I have to first say thank you also to Henry and Taylor for inviting me to be a part of this today. It's really special for me because I was supported by Rural Schools Collaborative as a 6th grade teacher. And now they're working with me to support teacher candidates. So it's just this beautiful circle of collaboration. And it's just such a joy and a pleasure to be a part of this organization. So yes, I am an assistant professor at Bemidji State University. I have been asked to speak about our efforts to recruit and retain rural educators, and in particular, students of color. But I also just want to, in the chat here, I'm just going to put out the link for our non-traditional program. It is for, this one in particular is Delight, and the program is an online program for working professionals, just what you were talking about, Jim. Our paraprofessionals, people who are working on a tier 2 license, they can't go to class during the day because they're teaching. And so we have this beautiful program that allows people to work toward their degree and licensure. And we meet in the cities 3 times a year. So I'm actually in my car because I'm driving to Minneapolis to teach our third session for the year, and it is a cohort model. So lots of the wonderful things that you've been talking about are addressed in this beautiful Delight program. And we also have what's called Fast Track, and that is for secondary licensure. It's not a degree program, but it is a licensure. So this particular discussion is really going to focus on our efforts to recruit and retain rural educators at our campus in northern Minnesota in Bemidji. And I just want to share with you that, just have to show a beautiful picture of our campus, right? Because you can't talk about Bemidji without talking about the beautiful scenery here. Here's our campus. It is located on the shores of Lake Bemidji, and the campus is actually, it's strategic, not strategically, but it's beautifully located in the heart of 3 American Indian reservations. And so when we talk about place-based learning, when we talk about the value of place and its importance, it is important for me to talk about this today. It is part of our programming. It's a part of who we are. And so we have a new land acknowledgement statement, and I'm not going to read it for you here, but you can certainly read it. And we share this land acknowledgement the first day of our class. We share it before any event on campus because we want to recognize and honor the place, PSU, and its connection with the Ojibwa and Dakota peoples. And so here you can see where we are located. Here is Bemidji and our campus. And we are in the middle of the Red Lake Reservation, Leech Lake Reservation, and White Earth Nation. And when we talk about the things that we're doing to recruit and retain rural educators, we have developed these beautiful relationships with tribal schools and schools with high percentages of American Indian students. And this isn't something that has happened just recently. This is something that has always been in process and in the works. I just get to see this now with my teacher candidates. So I wanted to highlight just a couple of the schools that our department uses for teacher candidates field placements. They're student teaching placements and just their experiences with diverse student populations. So the first one is the Red Lake Reservation, and that is located north of Bemidji campus. And that is actually a closed reservation. You cannot just drive onto the reservation. It is the only closed reservation in the state of Minnesota. And I believe there are not many closed reservations in the United States. These schools are public, but again, it's on a closed reservation. And so in the parentheses here, I have the percentage of American Indian students who attend these schools. And so it is very important for our students to, again, consider place, consider language, consider culture, and we are able to immerse our students in these beautiful learning experiences when they can go to these tribal schools. My teacher candidates have said their favorite experience is going to Red Lake. So, and there are a couple of other new schools. Some students have gone to the mission school, which is a Catholic school, and Red Lake has a new charter school. We do not have students there yet, but that could be a possibility in the future. And then if we go just a little southwest, we have White Earth Reservation, and that is an open reservation. We do have some different percentages of American Indian populations at these schools. For example, you can see Pine Point Public School has a very high percentage of American Indian students. Bagley has a high percentage, but not as high as these others. So our teacher candidates are going into these schools, and we are then part of this grant and part of our work. We're trying to connect with students while we're there as well, and get them thinking about careers in education and returning to their communities. The last one we have is Leech Lake Reservation. Again, it's an open reservation. Our students go to all of these schools for their field experiences. When we think about the schools and the university and the partnerships that we've created and that we are always trying to improve upon, it is important to just recognize the different ways in which we interact. As I mentioned before, the Red Lake Tribal School is one of our teacher candidates' favorite experiences. And that experience occurs during their third semester. So they are on campus for 9 weeks, and then they go to Red Lake Monday through Thursday, full day for 8 weeks, maybe 7 weeks. And so they're immersed in the culture and just that experience, that learning experience. And it's a very positive one for our teacher candidates. We also have teacher candidates who go out as student teachers, and we meet with all of our stakeholders through advisory board meetings twice a year. So we really want to be sure that we're connecting, finding out what are the needs within the schools. And it's through these conversations that we learned that our small schools don't, well, we know this, but they don't have as many opportunities as our larger schools. And so, for example, a concurrent enrollment course, which normally requires, maybe 20 students and a teacher to teach the course, our small schools, our small rural schools don't have that. And so what we have strived to do with the Rural Teacher Corps Catalyst Initiative is to create a program where BSU, Bemidji State faculty, teaches the course. And if Red Lake has 5 students that they want to bring, and White Earth has 2 students that they want to bring, and Pine Point has 1 student, we can create this learning opportunity for students that would otherwise not be present or available for small schools. And so what we've done is, I'm going to share a little flyer here. We're the Bemidji State Beavers. So one of our amazing staff members created this flyer for us. We wanted to create a course that would encourage high school juniors and seniors to consider a career in education and hopefully go back to their small community and teach in their community school. And so the Catalyst grant was that spark for us to build this incredible program. And so what we've done with that funding is we've planned for a concurrent enrollment course in the fall of 2024. And students from all over northern Minnesota can come or will come to Bemidji State for the first day of the course and the last day of the course. And that was really important for us because we wanted to have that interaction, and we wanted to make that learning accessible for our students. So we are providing the funding for transportation. There's no cost to the school district. If a counselor needs to drive that student to campus, then we will pay for a sub, things like that. We will provide for meals on campus when our students are here, all learning materials. Again, we want to make this program so that there are no barriers for participation from either the student or the district. And so we also have built in with this grant the idea of mentorship, because we've learned that students in small communities, and especially our students who live on reservations, are hesitant to leave that small community because there's such a strong connection there, right? And we want our students to make a connection with campus and with the students on campus. And so we have created 2 different mentorship models to support junior and senior students when they're taking this course. The first is a teacher candidate mentor. So a student from Bemidji State who is currently in the program will just check in with this junior, senior student, high school student every other week. You know, hey, how are you doing? How's the class? Are you experiencing any troubles? Can I help you with navigating the online system? And then we also have a classroom teacher mentor, because again, we're only meeting for the first day and the last day on campus, and the rest of the learning will be online. So we want someone from their district, someone from their school to just check in with them. How are things going? You know, can I help you with an assignment? Do you have questions about this theory or this teaching strategy? Things like that. Oh, and then here's some money. Take your student out for pizza or grab a cup of coffee, right? It doesn't have to be so serious, right? We want it to be fun. We want our students to have rich, meaningful discussions with experienced teachers. And so as a result of receiving the Catalyst grant, we were able to receive a state grant to just add extra money to this whole idea. So that grant will pay for the actual instruction, because teaching a class such as this is not cost effective for the institution. And so that's why high schools have this, right? It's cheaper for the high school teacher to teach it in their building. And so this model with the grant is possible, right? We are able to provide this to many different schools, no cost to them, and the grant is helping to pay for that instruction. So I just wanted to share, I have a student who gave me her permission to share this. We create a project in our LA1 and LA2, our language arts 1 and 2 courses, and they create a website and they embed different literacy components in there, and they have to introduce themselves. And I just have to share the last paragraph from this student's writing. And she said, I am a Native American from Red Lake Nation tribe, located in Red Lake, Minnesota. I am proud to represent my tribe by going into schooling after high school. A lot of my people do not usually go to college after high school, and that is okay. But I want to become a teacher because we need a lot of teachers in our district. And that's really what we're doing. We are trying to recruit and retain teachers and build them up for success so they can go back to their communities and support learning of their students. So now I have to share, Henry noted this at the beginning of our session. We have this beautiful, it's not a logo, it's a graphic. But we also received an additional grant, and this is it's called the CUGMEC. It's the Collaborative Urban and Greater Minnesota Educator of Color grant. And this grant supports teacher candidates of color with financial assistance as they are taking classes and pursuing a degree in education. And so we had all of these grants, and we're a small department, we're all working together, and we really wanted to put this together and just have it as an initiative. And so we have learned that when we're trying to name things, and we're including American Indian voices. It's very important that we don't just give something a name, that we ask for a name. And so we asked some of the American Indian leaders in our campus community, and they recommended that we use the term Amikwish, which means beaver lodge. And in a beaver lodge, you come, you're supported, you're protected, you're nourished. And that's what we're hoping to do with our programming at Bemidji State, using the grants that we've received. We want to recruit and retain educators. We're going to protect them and nourish them and help them grow into effective educators. So again, I just wanted to share some of the things that we're doing at Bemidji State. It has been such a joy to be part of this process, and we're just getting started. So thank you all very much.
Well, thank you, Kathrina, for sharing all of that. Now we're all tearing up here just on a Friday morning after hearing both those quotes from that student and then just kind of the broader ethos on how you're approaching all of that. So thank you so much. And just once again, want to thank all of our presenters for just being here, sharing so much both valuable knowledge, but also perspective on this. It's something that the whole RSE community is built on. So kudos to you all. And we just really, everyone here and everyone who's watching this at a future date really appreciates all of that. So major thank yous on our end. I'm really excited now to kind of open this up a little bit. I am sure that folks have questions that were inspired by these amazing 4 presenters. And if you can drop those in the chat, if you are a more verbal person and you want to hop in, that works as well. But I'd really love to be able to get a little deeper with some questions here. So don't hold back and let's see what you all are wondering about.
While folks are maybe thinking about questions, we also welcome comments and shout outs to the panelists. So I'll start with a shout out to the panelists. I'm curious, Amaya, if after hearing some of these presentations, if you have any thoughts on sort of how this resonates with the larger Grow Your Own national work that you're doing. Just curious if after kind of that deep dive, if you had any other sort of closing thoughts on the work that you do at the national level. And if not, that's okay too. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I think they're very representative of what you see across the landscape. We have programs that focus on high schoolers. I really like that graphic that Jeremy shared. I did a screenshot of it because people do like to actually see if you're going to start here, where you're going to end up, right? And I think that's always kind of missing from this conversation sometimes. I like this idea of a consortium, and I think that you don't see that a lot with Grow Your Own necessarily. And so I think like that kind of work is really important to helping like build capacity and spread awareness and how that work is happening around a particular state. A lot of the folks in our network actually are very eager for sort of more of that regional connection, regional work. And so those are kinds of ways and opportunities for folks to be connected with folks who work in similar contexts. Because while it's helpful to kind of learn from others nationally, sometimes you actually want to know what's going on in your own backyard. And I think we have a few programs that focus on Indigenous teachers, but I think that is something that's maybe been a little bit overlooked when we're thinking about the diversity issue. A lot of times we talk about, Black and Latino teachers, but I don't think we pay as much attention to the need within Indigenous communities to really build their own workforce and why that's really important. And I've been lucky to learn from folks who run those kinds of programs that have kind of expanded my thinking about sort of that aspect of teacher development. But again, I think overall it's really representative of sort of that diversity you see in GYO that has like a common goal around like solving similar problems, but are doing it in lots of different kinds of ways.
Thanks for sharing that, Amaya. I'm kind of curious from our 3 kind of currently operating programs, are there things you heard from each other that are kind of the classic, like, oh, I wish I could steal that, or and I wish I had thought of that type ones that really stand out to you all as pieces you want to highlight as folks who are currently going through creating and designing these sorts of programs?
And our other Real Teacher Corps partners, I see we have a few on too. Feel free to come off if you got some good ideas.
Absolutely, yeah. Jim, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I just want to, the storytelling is so important as we're talking about it. When we build up the ethos of education and the ethos of a school, like celebrating the successes and that is so crucial. And Jeremy, when you were sharing that last piece about that coffee shop, that is incredible. When you talk about place and the pedagogy of place and the meaning of that, it's like that's what keeps people. That's what people remember and talk about. It's interesting. I work and teach with both in preparation of teachers, but also educational leaders. And in Macomb, it's just, we are in the midst of cornfields, as Jeremy was talking. Like you basically every direction you drive through, you're going through cornfields to get to us. Actually, we're not that far off the Mississippi, so I guess that's only 20 miles that way. But what's amazing is how people latch on to iconic things, and that's what they keep asking about, and that's what really those stories and those memories are really key. And so that was neat. But then, and I'll say that, Kathrina, that then you're that student, it's like, my gosh, that is so powerful. Right, because that's, to me, when I talk with superintendents about, again, dealing with shortages, and like I get emails constantly, I'm looking for this teacher, I'm looking for that teacher, can you help us out? Is there anyone going to be graduating soon? That type of thing. And we're, we do what we can. But I always say, like, if we need to do is start shoulder tapping kids in school and junior high and in high school and saying, you know what, this is where, you're good at this, come back. We need you to come back and stay here. Particularly me as a math and science guy. That's how we're going to grow up those math and science teachers, I think. Because that's the challenge, because they can definitely make more in industry and engineering, right, in scientific fields. But to give back to your community in that way is really crucial and important. So to me, that's what really filled up my cup in a sense, is those stories that I heard. And it's like, I don't know, you can't steal them because you can't replicate them because they're authentic. But yet they remind us that this is what it's about and what's important.
Thanks, Jim. I'd love to kind of turn it over to a great question here from Kristen Cuthrell of East Carolina University, who leads RSC's Southeast Hub. So she wants to know that she's curious about how folks have been able to braid together all these different kinds of funding and money streams. What kind of staffing and capacity do you have for those? And kind of how in sync are university offices for that? So thank you for asking that, Kristen Cuthrell, and I'll turn it over to our panelists here.
Can I just jump in and say we are stretched super thin. And I mean, and that's where we're at. And that's part of our desire when we originally we're excited about the Grow Your Own opportunity. We got invited. We're thinking about capacity building, right? And I know that and what we've learned with Grow Your Own Illinois, that's not what that's not what their aim is. And so we've modified what our desires and asks from them have been. But yeah, that's a challenge. Because just as there's a teacher shortage, there's a human shortage. And so we're being very creative. We're layering different things as far as scholarships, and even how to, but it takes really creative people to do that. So.
Thank you for being real there, Jim. I don't know if my video is showing or not. My internet's being pretty funky, but when y'all were all talking, we've been trying to do some of that same kind of work here, but getting all the pieces to talk to each other at the university level and all the forms and things that keep changing. It's been quite a bit. And so, yes, it's nice to hear that it's not just here at our university, that it might be in other places too. So kudos to everyone though. Your passion and your love and your just the joy you're sharing in rural spaces and the working together with the communities. I love it. It's always invigorating. It's a good way to do a Friday. So
Right.
thank y'all for sharing.
But I'll have to say this. I don't think we would have created our consortium in the way we did. And I'm not, whether we were successful, I'm not sure, but if it wasn't for the collaborative building on ROE 33's teacher pathway grant, which was a layering of different grants, because it was a state grant, which was for the pathways, and then they got involved. And it's really when you've got talented people, that, I'm thinking of, Jody Scott from ROE 33 and Taylor, that was when you created those listening sessions or whatever, those 3 work sessions, that gave us the idea. So in a sense, not that we were able to replicate that, because I don't think we did, because we were more online and things, but yet there is something really, when you have an opportunity to see that and work. So I think that's great when you've got those models in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts from folks on Kristen's question there?
I mean, CEL is a little bit different because we're a center on a university's campus. So UIndy, the University of Indianapolis, does our administrative stuff, and we pay them through grant funds. So we are pursuing, grant funding for a lot of the projects we're doing, or schools pay us for services. So some of it was us helping schools to determine what funds could pay for our services. And one of the issues there is a lot of times schools are using funds the way they've always used their funds, and that's not necessarily how it has to be. So we've actually contracted with a former title and grants person from our Department of Education to come in and work with our schools and say, you could use this funding stream for this. And it's just light bulbs going off left and right in schools because they get so focused on using these funds for the same thing they've always done. They can't even imagine using them for something else. So I think that's one of the best things you could do is if you can find a creative grants person or a title fund, federal funds person, they're out there, they could really help.
And I'm going to piggyback on that too, with just receiving the Catalyst grant, just getting that, and literally like a couple of weeks later, one of our grant writers sent me a grant proposal and said, you should apply for this. And one of the boxes was, do you have support from someone else? And Taylor had said that at the beginning. And, I just didn't really, I didn't really believe it. I was like, I don't know. But it really was. And so now that we have that, and then, you all sharing the things that we're doing. Someone contacted me this week and said, hey, we're thinking about starting this kind of thing. Tell us what you're doing. How can we support you? And so it really is like, you just need you just have to take that step to go forward, right? Just take that step and then other things will fall into place. So if you're doing the good work, other people are going to want to be a part of that as well.
I saw, Amaya, you also came off mute. I know we talked a little bit in advance about some of those other streams as well that folks are utilizing, like residencies and apprenticeships. And did you have thoughts on that as well from sort of the national level in terms of braiding those fundings?
Yes. So I actually, part of what I'm doing right now is I fielded a survey of GYO programs. And I think I got like 85 responses. And I asked them about how they're funded, and most of them use district funds or state funds. Very few use federal funds from what I found. And so I think that there's a gap there potentially between the federal resources that are available and how people are really utilizing them for something like GYO, because obviously federal funds are more limited, particular ones that are title funds. But I think that it's something to think about, particularly as the federal government gets kind of more interested in this idea of teacher shortages. And one reason that people like apprenticeship is because it makes more funding available to you. You're eligible for more funding, but it's also mostly grants. And so I think there's still a lot of work to do to build sort of more stable funding for sources for these kinds of programs, because just operating on grants is largely insufficient. And so it's really being creative about what funds are coming in and how can I actually apply these within sort of the parameters of what's governing those funds. The thing I actually came up with me to ask about was how you institutionalize programs like this, because I think they are so driven, like, you know, talk about being spread thin, but they're also really driven by particular people who have a passion for it and drive for the work. And so I wasn't sure if any of the panelists had anything to say about sort of that idea of how you institutionalize this kind of work.
While the panelists are thinking, I also want to give a shout out to some of you may have been on last year's World Teacher Corps Forum, but we talked a lot about this model of the Ozarks Teacher Corps that actually came out of the Community Foundation of the Ozarks in Missouri. And as a local community foundation, they really saw this need to be able to partner with higher ed to make sure that all of their schools were strong and well staffed. And so I think that too often sometimes folks will think mostly about the big picture and chasing down those big dollars, but really thinking about who are the local folks who can also be your sort of unlikely or likely allies in this work is one of the ways that we've seen these programs really be sustainable, which is part of why I think a planning grant is great, to bring those multiple stakeholders together to say, this is for our community, it's for our town, we all have some skin in the game. So I just also want to give a shout out to them for sort of like, they've had this program now going for 10 plus years and has really become an inspiration for Rural Schools Collaborative as we sort of adapt this model elsewhere. But even, you know, to Jeremy's point of like, you know, when you tell the community this is what we want to do, and all of a sudden you exceed your fundraising goal of 65,000 plus, I think in the years that we've been supporting programs like this, we also really try to encourage folks to not just look for these grants and sort of external philanthropic things, but also try and build that buy-in locally, whether it's through community foundations, caring individuals. You know, that goes a long way in making sure that these have sticking power outside of just the grant. So not a perfect solution, but something that's been successful and a bright spot in this work. I don't know, Jim, did you want to talk about too, maybe some of the work that's been supporting the new Seymour Rural Education Center and how some of that came to be?
Well, I'm gonna, you know, actually, I see Gary's here, and so I mean, I think that when I first met him, I don't know how many years ago it was that maybe introduced me to the Rural Schools Collaborative, and really that effort to look at finding that philanthropic aspect of keeping money in the communities, right? And really, the Rural Center that we've got a good problem. We've got more grant money to give away than we have a vehicle right now to give it away, or scholarship dollars, that is, not grant money, but scholarship dollars, because of a gift that was given to you know, almost $3.5 million for scholarships. So when it comes to the Rural Teacher Corps, we don't have enough teachers to give that to, almost, in a sense, who are committed in that sense. So that's why we're actually redoing the I'll say the mechanism for that, the vehicle for distributing that. And that's why it's going to tie in nicely with the GYO. But one of the things that we recognize as when we created the center, we had a teacher corps first, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, maybe we could come along with a Center for Rural Education, which is not only focusing on the teacher corps, the home of it, but then also aspects of advocacy and scholarship. So I think that's one of the things that we're looking at, and it's all, these things are all adding together, because, you know, once you know that you've got philanthropic, that ties in then with the ability sometimes to let people know, like, there's this potential here for growth with additional grant monies. And at our institution, we just actually, in a good way, because of the Grow Your Own planning grant that we received, and then now we submitted the implementation grant, we're in the process of writing for a national professional development grant for multilingual teachers in West Central Illinois. And again, it's that kind of additive type thing, all under the umbrella of, because of the, you know, this Great River Consortium. And we're, you know, again, we're slowly pulling these threads together, but it is a lot of human people that are doing that. So I think that's, you know, but it goes back to like keeping things localized in the community. I mean, that's one of the things that's important.
Thanks, Jim. And I see we're at right at the noon mark here, and I know that means a lot of people probably do have the next meeting or the next things to get to. So I'll wind us down here, but just one final thank you to our 4 presenters. We so appreciate the time, and a thank you to everyone else who thought to join us this morning. We really appreciate that. Just being part of this learning community and joining us. So if you have other questions later, thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out and we can try to answer them or make connections as need be. Just a few things I want to kind of tell you about coming up on RSC's calendar right now, starting, it's been happening and ending in early May. We have our National Signature Project Award grant. We heard a lot about place and place-based kind of learning and the importance of that throughout this morning. And so I just want to highlight that this is a grant we do in conjunction with the National Rural Education Association that really provides just an amazing platform and opportunity for teachers to do a place-based project in their classroom. So if you have a teacher you know who you just think could be a really good candidate to enact a cool place-based project, go ahead and send them this link. If they're in a rural area, they probably fit for it. So that's just a good thing to be aware of. And then I'll also always just, if you want to hear more about our partners and the great work they're doing, check out our website, our socials, and subscribe to our newsletter. Comes out every week. And Savannah just popped the link in the chat there. You are on it, Savannah. And that's just got a lot of great stories and other just happenings too, where we promote what's going on with our partners and other opportunities that kind of come across our desk. So always a good thing to check out. With that, I'll kind of wind this down. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your Friday and weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.